Hi, I'm Celine Perkins with Perkins Dry Goods. Welcome to part 8 of the Barn Star Sew Along. This is the last block we're making for the quilt before we assemble everything. This is by far my most favorite block in the quilt, and I think you'll find that it's fairly easy to put together, although there are some things you will want to pay attention to. A pinwheel block. The pinwheel is made from half square triangles. You take the light and the medium red squares, put them right sides together. You have a line drawn diagonally corner to corner. You're going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch on either side of that line. Then you'll cut it apart and you'll trim it to size. And I like to use the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer. It allows me to cut to the perfect size, plus the slots let me trim off the dog ears all in the same step. So here you have a perfectly sized half square triangle unit. These are pressed, the seams on these are pressed open. Press the seams open. When you put the units together, make sure that the medium fabric is up and to the right. The one that you pair it with will be down and to the right. You make 2 of these, sew them together, and you've got a pinwheel that's circling around clockwise. You'll press this final seam open. You'll also press the seam between the 2 half square triangle units open. So everything is pressed open on this block. The next step in creating this star block is to make the star point units. And these are simply flying geese units. You'll take your medium red rectangle, you'll place a dark square right sides together. You'll have a line drawn corner to corner, and you'll stitch just outside that line towards the outer corner. Then you fold back to make sure everything is lining up the way you want it. Then you'll trim to 1/4 inch, press toward the corner. Next step, take another dark fabric square, right sides together on the opposite corners, stitch just outside the drawn line toward the outside corner. Check to make sure everything lines up, then you'll trim and press to the corner. You'll need to make 4 of these for the star. The next step in the star is to sew the geese units to either side of the pinwheel. You'll add small squares to either side of the top and bottom row flying geese, and you'll press toward these squares and you'll press toward the pinwheel. Then to create the hayloft, you'll need to add 2 strips along the side. These strips are labeled G, and then a wider strip across the top, which is a strip labeled H. And this is where you really want to pay attention to the size of this square. There's another rectangle that will go on the bottom, and that is J. So here you've got G on the sides, H across the top, which is wider than J, which goes on the bottom. When you add these rectangles, you'll be pressing toward the rectangle away from the square. Next step is to create the roof line for the hayloft. You have a large background square. You'll draw a line diagonally, and you'll stitch on this line just a thread toward the outside corner. Fold it back to make sure everything lines up, and then you will trim this down to a 1/4 inch seam. You'll repeat on the other side. Stitch just next to this drawn line, just a thread away toward this outer corner. Fold back and make sure that everything lines up, and then trim. So this is the hayloft, or the top part of the barn. The next step are the sides of the barn. And this step can be a little tricky. It's important to look at the diagrams in the pattern. You will be drawing a diagonal line on the back of the large background rectangle. And a way that I found that works well for me is to use my long ruler and find this 45-degree line. Line that up with the vertical edge of the rectangle. The point is at the corner at the top, and then draw your line with a pencil. You can do the same with the right hand side of the barn. And if I can get my bearings here, get the line, the 45-degree line, line it up with the edge of the large rectangle. Your point is up here, draw your line. These units are left and right. So after you stitch this, and again, you're going to stitch just on the outside of that line, you'll fold this back, make sure it lines up, trim this to 1/4 inch. Do the same with the right hand unit. Check to make sure everything lines up. You want this all straight. You'll trim to 1/4 inch. And just so you can see here, you've got a left and a right angle. These create the sides of the barn. You'll be pressing toward the background. The next step is the barn doors. The instructions have you cut an oversized rectangle of the medium fabric. You'll then be trimming that down, but first you'll want to fuse the fusible web to the back. You'll want to draw a line diagonally from corner to corner on both of these, because you're going to be cutting it in half diagonally twice. And if by chance your pieces shift, you have a line to follow that will give you the correct placement of to cut. After you get the pieces cut, you'll want to take the fusible web off, and you'll notice there are pretty sharp points here, and you can easily fray that. So what I recommend doing is taking a pin and scoring the back of the the paper side of the fusible web. You can just give it a little tug, and then it will allow you to remove the paper without having to pick at the corners of your triangles. That works pretty well. So you will have your background cut from your accent fabric, and then your medium fabric triangles. And these have been cut, and when you place them on the gold or the accent barn door, I like to use a ruler and line up the 1/2 inch line, so then I can place my triangles right up against that. I know that the placement is correct. I also finger press this so that I have a center cross point, and I can line up the points of these triangles there so that they're centered. So I do measure up 1/2 inch, make sure the point is placed at the center, and I do this on the ironing board because, of course, if I move it, everything will shift. So this is all correct, and then I press and fuse this down. What I like to do is secure these raw edges with a narrow zigzag, or you can use a blanket stitch or buttonhole type stitch. I use matching thread, but you can certainly use a contrasting thread if you prefer. Barn doors, and you make 2 of these. You stitch these together, and if you've got everything placed properly, you should have about 1/4 inch around the outside edge and about 1/2 inch in the center. To assemble the barn block, you will take the hayloft, your rectangle J, and your barn doors and stitch them as the center unit. Then you'll take your long rectangle units and add them to the sides. You just need to pay attention that your roof lines are going the way that you want them to and sloping away from the center of the barn of the quilt. Thanks for watching. This was part 8 of the Barn Star Sew Along.